Hello and welcome to Antimatter Garage. Today we're talking P0440. Yep, that dreaded code that so many people struggle to fix in their MR2 Spyders. So when I had that code show up, I made a couple of assumptions. The first thing I did was I assumed that the problems I was having with the way the engine was running was related to the code that I received. Apparently that's probably not true, so I may be solving two problems here. The other was I immediately started taking things off. I figured, hey, it's got to be the tires, right? So let me show you what I got. Step one ought to be to remove the fuel cap and toss it and get a new one. It's just really not worth trying to diagnose it or anything, but that's often the cause of these problems, and it's cheap and easy to do from outside the car without having to take anything apart. Really just bite the bullet and do that. There's an O-ring in there that seals it up against the filler neck, and that is often what will fail. It gets crushed and old and brittle and cracked over time, and that's a problem, right? So do that first. I did. It didn't solve my problem. I mistakenly did what I do pretty much every time I have a problem. I went straight to YouTube, then tried to find somebody who'd done it, because I figured not only is he going to explain it in easy terms instead of combing through the user manual, which may or may not help me, but he's also going to show me exactly, how to do it and where everything is. And I found one, and it's a pretty good one. I will put a link in the description. It's by a guy, the channel's called Relentless Racing, and he did a very, very good job explaining how to take the gas tank out. And to solve the P0440, he replaced this valve here and all of the associated tubing, and I decided to do the same thing, including way in the back there is the fuel pump, and around the fuel pump is like an O-ring type gasket. He said to, replace that one as well while you're there. The problem happened when I did that and found that the gaskets seemed to be in pretty good visual condition. In addition, the valve that I replaced here, I believe is pretty good, because let me see if I can do this so you can see it. You could see that was moving pretty freely. That's the old one. It's not real expensive, so I don't mind putting a new one in, but I'm guessing none of that is the issue. And in fact, I've had a P0440 code happen before on my wife's Solara, and it turned out to be the charcoal canister, which I found another video. I will also put that in the description. An excellent one, because he does a very good job of describing how the system works, which is what I was exactly looking for. And he said usually it's the charcoal canister, which it was on her car, and I believe it is on mine. Now, I went through some checks from the book, but what I didn't like about the checks, and I will show you what I got on those, and I'm going to recheck those now, was that, it was bad. But what I didn't like is I didn't understand really what I was doing. I was just sort of following the directions of plugging this hole and checking a vacuum here and making some assumptions about whether or not air was flowing. So now that I sort of understand the system better after having viewed that video, I'm going to look and make sure that all makes sense, and make sure that this is switched properly as well. And I'm going to do kind of my own version of this, and just to make sure. My guess is this or both are bad. The guy said that there are diaphragms in there, and the diaphragms can get dried out and they stop working. And I believe that's exactly what's happened here. But regrettably, they don't seem to sell just these things, even though they're bolted on. They have an O-ring inside, so you have to buy the whole canister, and it's like $200. So let me see here. First of all, let me verify that that's the problem. If it is, I'm a busy person, and I can't just go and take this apart and try and make my own gasket and stuff. I'm just going to pay the $200 and get the new canister, I'm guessing. But I do want to make sure that's the problem, so that that code goes away and I don't have to worry about it anymore. So, another thing I didn't really like about the two videos that I think were both, two videos I watched that were both really, really good, was that both guys used a complicated tool, cough drop, to examine the system, and they were able to, through the diagnostic port of the car, turn on these various valves and then do their checks and read the pressure sensor from the tank. And I don't have that tool and can't do that. And they were like, oh, you have to check it out the way the computer in the car does. And I say, I don't really think you have to. I've already removed the charcoal canister, and I believe I can trigger those switching valves manually and see if they're working and check them. So I'm going to show you how to do that if you don't have all those fancy tools. Alright, if you're like me, I got confused by this diagram because, for instance, at these points, it's hard for me to tell, is this open, closed, is each one of these lines open or closed? It all goes here, and then this seems to all go there, and is that all one box or what? And then they're always open, and how do you sort of figure out what's going on, right? So, I'm going to try and explain it. There are a couple of conditions that can exist. One is when you're fueling your tank, and this came off of the video I said where the guy did a good job of explaining it. And as the fuel goes in, there's air in the tank, right? And the air will continue to compress until it gets to the point where there's too much pressure in here, and then this will cut off, and you won't be able to fill your tank. And this is what happens when stuff malfunctions sometimes in these cars. In order to prevent that, they have to let the air go out somewhere. Well, they don't, just like normal, they don't want it to be vented directly to the atmosphere, so it goes through the charcoal canister, which absorbs the fumes and lets out more or less fresh air from the drain. So if something's like clogged here, that'll prevent you from filling your tank. And if that's the problem you're having, you may want to look there. Another situation is, so just a little history as to what goes on here. Gas tanks, so fuel is... if the gas tank is subjected to some kind of vacuum, and this can happen when you're sucking fuel out, right? Or even with temperature changes, it may want to collapse and it'll actually crunch your gas tank. Or if it's too hot and there's too much pressure in there, it'll actually expand it out like a balloon. I had this happen actually with a gallon can of gas that I had in the garage, and I used it all up and there were just fumes in there. And one day it came out and the thing was just crushed in. I guess it was a cold day or whatever. And so, in the early days, what they did was they put a valve in there to vent it to atmosphere so that it could allow the pressure to equalize. But that has a problem, several problems actually. One, if you just have a vent coming out, your fuel's going away, right? It evaporates very quickly, and having a vent like that will make you lose gas. Two, gas is bad for the environment, and you don't want to, directly put unspent fuel into the atmosphere. And three, if it's the other direction, because the pressure is the other way around, then you could be pulling moisture from the air into your gas, and it'll run poorly. So I guess the point there is, so they had to have this system set up, right? And the main takeaway here, I think, from that in general is that you really shouldn't get rid of this. This is a good thing. It's a pollution control device, but it doesn't cost you anything in horsepower. And it's good for everything. It's good for gas mileage, good for the environment, good for the running of the engine, because when it needs more fuel, it can take it from there. Why take it from the gas tank itself when you can take basically waste fumes, right, and put it into the engine? So it's a good thing. But they had to come up with a new way instead of just venting to the atmosphere, and that's the charcoal canister. The fumes go in there, and the charcoal actually absorbs it. Now, side note, it can't absorb fuel, actual liquid. It really only absorbs the vapor. It'll saturate, so there's only so much it can handle, right? But they didn't want to just, my Corolla just put the stuff in sort of willy-nilly. I mean, it had a control, but it was very minimal, and this is a little bit more complex. And so here's kind of how it goes. The fumes from the charcoal canister, when they're needed, go through the purge line, through this line here, when this is opened up, and then are dumped into the engine to be burned. Now, the same thing would happen to the charcoal canister as happens to the gas tank if you try and suck it out without letting something in, right? Eventually, it would be trying to pull against too much vacuum, and it wouldn't be able to pull strongly enough, right? So you have to let air in, and that happens right here. And the idea is they want filtered air to come in. So this is on your air box where your air filter is, because it should be on the other side, right, after the air has already passed through. That's where you should find this. And then this opens up, and that allows air to come into the charcoal canister when it's being purged. So that's these two valves more or less explained. Toyota uses a third valve, or the Spyder anyway, uses a third valve called the pressure switching valve. And the idea is that the pressure switching valve essentially separates the charcoal canister side from the fuel tank side like this. So charcoal canister, and what this allows is for the computer to look at this pressure sensor that's on the fuel tank, and I can show you what that is, to determine, hey, if I sever this and I look and I'm not keeping vacuum here or pressure or whatever it's looking for, then there's a leak. And if this is closed and the two are separated, and it can look at this side, determine the same thing, and then it can try and find out, hey, what's the problem, where's the problem, set off the code, the P0440 that we all have, right? So now let me show you where those things are in reality. I got a label maker for Christmas. I love it. I've labeled these for your sake, yeah, because I'll totally remember where all this stuff goes. But anyway, if you're wondering, I just put them in line. This is the vent, this is the evap, this is the purge, it's kind of around there. I'm looking at it from the side where it only has one bolt. Air inlet here, and the drain is over here. Now, you may not have a fancy plug like I have here, and I kind of think this maybe came on this. I don't know what it came on. I have a box of these things. I just keep them when I get them on stuff, brake lines and things like that. But I just used my thumb, and I put it over nice and strong, and that seemed to work just fine. Problem is I could run out of fingers depending on the test I'm doing. But anyway, this is this one right here is the pressure switching valve. And I put it right here. This is on the charcoal canister. So if you're wondering, this is the diagram for the MR2 Spyder, and this is the diagram for a Celica 2001 Celica GTS, and on it, they're actually the same diagram. This is something else that concerned me, because I noticed in some people's swaps, one of these VSVs had a larger diameter hose coming in, or like the nipple part. And I was wondering if that meant it was different. Maybe it was normally closed versus normally open or something like that. But now that I see the diagram, I know that's not true. It's just got a larger hole. And I think that it should be fine to use the smaller one, because these are all vapors and air, and pressure goes pretty quick. So I don't think it's flowing so much that the diameter really matters. And I think you can use either the Celica one or the Corolla if you have the 2ZZ from the Corolla, or the one that came stock on the Spyder. So the other two of those switching valves are up here on the Spyder. Now there's a service port here, and there's the VSV and the CCV. Now if you can't sort of tell where they're going or where they are, well, that's when you would use this, right? So you'll know that the CCV should connect to the airbox. So all you have to do is follow the line from the airbox to the CCV, and then you'll know that's the right one. And then process elimination gives you the other one, right? But if not, you could always trace it to go find it, right? So, two up here, one down here. And what you can do then is look at the schematic diagram and connect to the right pins and click them on. Now, the guy on this channel said that you shouldn't hold power on this for too long. They'll burn up. I guess they only switch briefly, or they cycle. So that's okay, because all you really need to do is apply voltage and ground. The computer uses ground. I would do this separate from the computer. You don't want to blow up the computer. I'd do it just like this. But find the plus and minus, put it on there, and first of all, listen for a click. You should hear an audible click. And if you don't hear that, then it's probably broken. But either way, you should check it. You should either blow through it or suck through it, one side or the other. Find out if it's normally closed. Try it that way. Apply, your signal. Open it. Make sure that it open. If it's normally closed, open, then do it the other way around. So you can check each one of those valves that way. Then you can do the checks here and make sure that what's happening here corresponds to what's happening over there. I'm going to do that now. So according to the book, here we go. So according to the book, a lot of these checks can be done while they're still on the car. And frankly, access to this charcoal canister is pretty easy, relatively speaking, because you don't have to get at it from underneath. If you just take apart your entire brunk area, it's located right there, and then you can access these lines, these 5 lines that come into it, and pull them off and do some of these tests that way. I find myself in this position where I've already got them apart, so I'm going to do it off the car. Okay, so this first check says basically to blow air into the evap port while everything else is essentially closed. Well, not everything, the air inlet. So what you're doing here is through all of these tests, the vent has a cap on it. See here, here, and here, right? So
that means the vent line is capped off. They're telling you to put your finger over the purge line, so that's capped off. The air drain hose is capped off. So all you really have left now, if you blow into the Evap, which is the only remaining one open basically except for the air inlet, that nothing comes out the air inlet. So you're pushing this way and you're making sure nothing comes out of this way, and that makes sense because this diaphragm in here should be one way. You're only allowing air into the charcoal canister this way. You don't want anything to flow that way because it's designed to go through there and into the engine, right? So you cap everything off, you blow into the Evap, and you check and make sure nothing comes out of the air drain hose. Oh, sorry, of the air inlet. Alright, so that means I need to cap this guy and this guy with my fingers, or some suitable thing, and then blow into here. I have to warn you, I did this already, and you're going to suck some fumes if you're not careful. So let me see if I can do this with one hand. It's hard to... Alright, I've got my fingers on it. Here we go. Yeah, I couldn't get anything to come out. Now, I didn't apply a lot of pressure, but right here it's 0.26 psi is all you're looking for. Human mouth is easily capable of that, I'm guessing. Alright, so having passed the first test successfully, it says here to apply vacuum to the purge port and make sure that if you plug the air inlet port, it holds a vacuum. So again, they're trying to check the path between the air inlet and the purge line. So if you plug this and then you apply vacuum on the purge line, it ought to create a vacuum and not go away until you pull your finger off. Then it should go away and allow air to come in. I guess in this instance, these other lines are not a problem because it doesn't say to plug them. So I'll do that now. This is a vacuum gauge, and I kind of think you're going to need one to do this test. So, yeah, I would buy one, or otherwise you're going to just be taking pot shots at replacing parts. So, I'm going to take this guy, and I'm going to plug it onto the purge line, which is over here. And I think I can do that. I did it before. So be careful not to break the plastic. If you do, then, well, there's not a lot you can do to fix that, right? So I believe that's good. Let me get a tripod. Okay, so I can't be certain that my vacuum connections are that tight, to be honest. So, but I'll find out. If something's leaking, I'll have to check that as well, right? So it says to cap the air inlet, and I'm going to show you here. I'm going to pull a vacuum. Ruh-roh. What went wrong there? Let me check. Maybe I need them both plugged after all. Huh. Okay, so like I said, maybe this is the purge line. Vacuum is no decrease on there. Huh. Yeah, it doesn't show. See, I could have sworn it passed this test earlier. Air inlet. Hang on. Okay, so it's been a few days. Let me see what's going on the screen here. You know, life got in the way, and I had to go get some more of these little parts and stuff to get this to work. But if you look right, this kind of stuff kind of barely fits. But if I plug this end with my thumb and then I pull a vacuum, you can see not only does it pull a vacuum, but it seems to hold pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and try that now. To be honest, I kind of forgot where I was, so I think I'm on this step here. It says plug the vent port, which I have done here. Plug the air. I don't know how well these hold, so if I lose it, I might have to try a different way just to make sure, but I think that's good. So plug the vent port, plug the air inlet port, apply a vacuum to the purge. So here's the purge. It didn't say to put any, to plug any of the other ports or anything. Oh, this one works really well. There we go. So I'll just stick that on there. And I know this line is good all the way to there. I just checked it in front of you. So here we go. So now I will blow vacuum. Yeah, that's nothing. So I'm just going to try and put these down harder. Make sure it's sealing. Yeah, so it's failing. And I think, oh, I can actually smell some fuel. So from what I understand, these guys here have like a diaphragm in them and they can get old. This one I'm pretty sure is good, but I'm thinking this one is bad because it definitely failed that test. So I'm going to move on to the other test just to verify. So in the interest of being thorough, I really should check these hoses as well. It could be one of them is leaking. I'm pretty sure they look like they're in really good condition. I'm pretty sure it's not the case. I'll do that off of camera, but yeah, you might check those just to be on the safe side. But I'm pretty sure this is the problem right here. So it occurred to me that as I was editing this video that I left out some details on the last test. So I think that's because mine already failed. It failed the 4th and the 5th test. So it's a little too late to go back now, but what I can do is I will post pictures right now of how to do all 5 of the tests. So if you pause the video, you can print that out and handle that on your own if you're having this problem. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.